Welcome on back to the overnight edition of From Day One. Art Bell and part 3 of the God part of the brain is on tap. So while we rock through Dominion, let's continue with the immortal Art Bell.
So it's the closest possible solar system where other life could emerge. Is it likely that it's emerged in coincidentally the nearest star to us? Probably not. But let's even take the nearest star and work with that. 4.2 light years away. Well, light travels 186,000 miles per second, making a light year equal to approximately 6 trillion miles. That makes Alpha Centauri approximately 25 trillion miles away. The closest solar system to Earth, to our solar system. At that distance, if you were to take the fastest spacecraft that humans have created, which was the Voyager, at the speed of the Voyager, it would take 75,000 years for a craft to go from Earth to Alpha Centauri. And again, this is giving a leap that we're even going to say, let's say there's life on Alpha Centauri in one of the planets in its solar system. Even
Probably
intelligent
not.
life. Right, probably not. But I'm just going to give the benefit of the doubt, super intelligent life, smarter than us, maybe even capable of space travel. They're bouncing around the planet in their solar system. For them to get here, again, at a super fast pace, it would take 75,000 years. Let's say it's a species, I'm going to even give another stretch. Let's say it's a species that happens to have great longevity. Each individual lives to be 5,000 years old. Now,
let's look at another species, because I already know where you're going with that one. Let's look at a species that's been on Earth for 1 billion years, longer than we have. Quite likely, actually, when you consider things. 1 billion years longer than we have. Look at what has changed for us, Matthew, in the last 100 years. Now, project another 1 billion years. Now, let's start to assume that they found a way to travel faster than light, or they found a way to fold back space and jump from point A to point B. In other words, they can figure
right,
out...
well, like I said, I knew, anyone where I would present this can go there, that yes, there might be technology. Again, I can't debate imaginary technologies that could do magical things. Yes, absolutely.
Only magical because we don't understand.
Right, no, not even magical. It's like super technological.
That was your word, not mine.
I know, I'm taking it back. Okay. Super technological, major advances beyond our capacity. Agreed. All of that's possible. But I do believe that the speed of light is a constant. I don't believe we will ever travel at it. I don't believe that molecules like in Star Trek, that there'll ever be, where we can project a human from one place to another in an instant, where molecules will dissipate, be sent through space beyond the speed of light, and then reemerge. I don't think, again, and this is all just based on my understanding of the laws of physics. Maybe what we know today will one day be, antiquated, and yes, we'll travel at the speed of light. I don't see it, but in the meantime, from what we do understand, yes, it would take like 20 generations of a very long-living species to travel here. So even let's say they can bend space, it's still going to take a lot of work, and there's probably a lot of risk involved. So why would a species risk to bend space, come to Earth, do a few anal probes, maybe cut a few circles in the crops? It's like, would you travel a gazillion miles to ring someone's doorbell and run? Like, why aren't they here? Why aren't we hanging out with them? Why have they dominated us, made us their dolls?
Right. That's all fair comment, I suppose, and I don't have an answer for it, but I think that the other argument that they are out there somewhere and that there's somebody millions of years ahead of us is a reasonable argument, and so we could be visited. You can't just blanketly deny it. By the way, I want you to hear this love letter, and this is to Ian. Says, "Hey, Art, I just wanted to say, as a former Christian and now an atheist, I agree with Mr. Alper, and I want to voice support for his views. I feel a far more spiritual feeling looking at pictures from Hubble than I do from the Bible. Thanks for having him on."
Excellent. One for Matthew.
Make you feel warm and fuzzy, and begins to take a little blood away from the amygdala, or what?
Well, thank whoever sent that.
Ian, yes.
Ian, thank you, Ian.
Right, okay. Now, let's talk about humans evolving. Let's look another, I don't know, 1,000 years from now. I would assume we'll take another evolutionary leap of some sort. What do you expect as evolution continues to grind away?
Okay. Well, again, an opinion that probably isn't all that popular with the folk, but I believe...
Throw it in the bucket. The bucket's already full.
I believe, well, it's about to overflow. I believe that humans are done evolving. That contrary to all of the alleged science articles depicting humans with giant foreheads to fit their bigger brains and longer fingers, et cetera, that this is it. We're done. And I can tell you why we're done. There's a
Are you sure you're not speaking on a purely personal level now?
Well,
Sorry.
Well, I'm always speaking on a personal level, but I'll tell you why. This is my personal belief.
Okay.
And it kind of goes back to the theory again that basically, with the evolution of self-conscious awareness, humans have transcended the process of natural selection. Let me explain. So, up until humans, let's say there's a shift in the Earth's axis and the temperature of the planet drops 100 degrees. Well, what happens? The environment changes and all of the animals that exist on the planet suddenly have to adapt. So let's say, for instance, the creature with the furriest coat tends to survive and live long enough to reproduce, whereas the others in its species start to die off. 5 million years later, we've got a furrier species, such as the woolly mammoth. Now, humans come along, and that's how evolution has worked from the beginning of organic matter, 3.2 billion years ago. So now all of a sudden man comes into the picture, and because of our capacity for self-conscious awareness, the temperature drops, as I said before, it gets colder. We don't sit passively back like every other animal. We can say, I am cold, and we have the digits and mathematical and engineering capacity to manufacture a coat of fur in an hour. And that applies to every possible technology. If we look up at the sky and say, oh, look at those lucky birds, think how advantageous it would be to fly. Boom, we build wings. We want to go underwater like the fish. Boom, submarines. Whatever we want, basically, we can manufacture it. We can travel, unlike any species, we can migrate to any portion of the planet, and we can create a synthetic environment in which we can survive. Meaning that no matter what changes take place, because that's what forces evolution, an environment changes, there's a climatic change, there's a new animal introduced into the area. Whatever the case, the tectonic plate shift, and suddenly the Earth's surface is different. It's hotter, it's colder, there's lava pools involved, whatever the case may be. With humans, we can migrate to any environment, and we can synthesize it to suit our needs so that we won't change anymore, but basically we will change our environment way sooner than the environment will change us. So we're done naturally selecting. We now modify ourselves to suit our environment in any way possible. Our imaginations are seemingly limitless. So basically, we're done. We're not going to...
How long ago do you think we got done?
We got done when we got born, which was about 100,000 years ago at the dawn of Homo sapien. Our species... And our species alone, none of the progenitors of man, not Homo erectus and Peking man and Australopithecus, none of them had all of the potential that we do. But when man got cooked, done. Game over for natural selection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That really is a wow. Okay. Just for the sake of time here, let me move on.
Okay.
There's been study after study after study showing, interestingly, that when a group of people pray for somebody, it has a measurable, actual effect. Now, these are double-blind studies, and I wonder how that information gets digested by Matthew Alper.
I would put it into the category of charlatanism. Anybody who suggests that there's a study that if everyone prays, there are consequences, would not explain the fact that every one of us continues to die. And you tell me one person who prays that isn't praying that we live longer. Oh, please don't take my father. Please don't let this one
of course,
die.
yes, I know.
So
But I'm talking about real scientific studies when people have no idea they're being prayed for by these groups. There really are these studies, man.
Again, I would not believe in any of them. And any guest that would come onto your show and suggest that there are, I would just say is a charlatan selling snake oil. Because you know what? For every case where, like, little Jimmy, who was diagnosed with cancer and the doctor said has 3 months to live, and the community prayed, and he lived, and, well, what was it? Of course it was a miracle. There's no other explanation. For every little Jimmy, there's 50,000 Jimmys who are dead. Because everyone in the community still prayed for him. They didn't pray any less hard. But life has a way of killing people.
Okay, but you're whizzing by my argument. And that is that there have been controlled studies of people who don't know they're being prayed for versus those who are not being prayed for, and the recovery rate is significantly different.
Right. Again, you know, you can pass this off as just New York City arrogance based on, and I've done my research too. I would just say that's charlatanism. People making false claims.
All right, here's Rick who says, what a stretch. What biological function would put a fake God awareness in our brain? He's assuming a cause and effect. The MRI of the brain could be reacting to God, not the other way around, that he assumes just because he wants to disbelieve.
Well, again, I would have to go with the argument about what God, which God, the great big bird in the sky, the snake spirit? How can a belief in such disparate realities cause the same thing, and then one argue that there must be a God? So if I believe in the snake spirit, or the raven spirit, or, you know, the Norse wolf spirit, or any number of gods, Buddha, Krishna, Moses, Jesus, Allah, etc., the list goes on, and they all produce the same effect, how is that evidence that all of those characters exist? Where do you go with that?
Do you believe in the devil?
Of course not.
Okay, well, that's something. What about the existence of evil on Earth?
Okay.
And I mean real evil. We've had lots of recent examples of serious evil.
Okay. Evil's a great word. There's some evil people out there, but when I refer to evil, I put it in quotes. Because just as I don't believe in God, I don't believe in evil. Because evil would signify, the way you're suggesting it, that there are forces at work, as if there's like a spiritual good and a spiritual evil. And again, I refer back to the brain. I believe that good and evil are categories by which we are wired to perceive certain aspects of human behavior. So it's our nature to look at people who, let's say, commit destructive acts against the community and be repulsed by them, to come up with words that indicate evil and that they should be punished. And these are universals in every culture. Of course, it's necessary that we judge those who want to hurt us in a negative way. And this is the language of basically keeping us alive as a social organism. Moreover, to again refer back to the brain, there have been numerous studies done on moral reasoning and its relationship to the brain. So, for instance, the first indication was a man, Phineas Gage, in 1848, worked in the railways. There was an explosion, a metal rod penetrated his head, pierced his right frontal lobe, a portion of the brain that's now referred to as the Brodmann 10 region. He went from a upstanding, church-going, hard-working man to a vagabond, thief, lying cheat. Left his family, left his job, roamed the world, stealing and cheating and lying. Total mystery. And then until 150 years later, when they could now do neuroimaging and found that others who live today who suffered similar damage to the Brodmann 10 region of their brain become sociopathic. And that they've done studies, MRIs, of people on death row, and a good portion of people on death row, regardless of what prison you go to, have suffered trauma to their Brodmann 10 region in the brain. You've got Dr. George Mole, the head of neurology and neuroimaging in Rio, who has done experiments basically putting people in an MRI and asking them a variety of questions. What's your favorite color? Who do you think is a funnier comedian? And then sticking in between questions that dealt with moral reasoning. You know, is it okay for a man to steal from someone just because he's stronger, et cetera, et cetera? You get the idea. Basically,
let's talk for a second about morality, since you brought it up.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you actually managed to convert everybody.
Yeah.
And this country suddenly became atheist coast to coast. Aren't you at all worried about the sudden lack of moral behavior that would ensue? In other words, bad as it may be now,
no, because
without the control of the belief in God and some sort of ultimate punishment for doing wrong, you might have to start carrying a gun. Boy, you might carry a gun anyway. Actually,
I don't. Well, first of all, they'd be minion slaves of my cult, and they would do as I tell them. For those who disobey, no. Essentially, I don't believe. See, I'm part of a community that refer to themselves as secular humanists, the humanist community. And humanists don't believe that morality is based in religion, which would explain why a lot of religious people are highly immoral. And you can't argue that.
Okay. No, and I'm not going to even try. But what I am going to say is, if you manage to convert all these people, those who have been relatively moral because they believe in the hereafter,
but I don't believe that makes people moral. I don't believe there's one person out there who, because he believes in the hereafter, made them a little more honest, a little less deceptive, a little less apt to, like, smash someone over the head with a bottle. And again, because I believe these are all facets of the human condition, of the way we are hardwired to perceive reality. Religiosity is one part of the brain. Moral consciousness is another. Some people are born highly moral, or with a propensity to be highly moral, regardless of their upbringing. And some people are going to be born with a propensity towards sociopathy, again, regardless of how they're raised. You could raise someone with a predisposition of sociopathy by Mother Teresa and some other holy person and Gandhi, and they'll still go out and be Jeffrey Dahmer because they were born broken. Because it's just
there will be some of those. But Matthew, if you took the support of religion and faith away from the masses, you really would have a different situation on your hands.
No, I don't believe it.
To you might think it would be an ideal world, but I don't think so. I think that religion does, in fact, control people in a positive way.
Really? Is that why we're at war? Is that why we're at religious war now, and throughout human history have never not been? Religion is just as apt to send people to go kill in the name of their gods as to then preach, be good to others. And again, I don't buy it. How often do you see it? I believe
it is true that everybody goes to war saying God's on our side.
Right. I believe that true moral reasoning should be taught should be taught in a way based in social science, not as a threat that the only reason you shouldn't go stab your neighbor and take his belongings is because you'll burn in hell. I think that teaches a primitive moral sensibility, whereas if you teach a more sophisticated moral sensibility, like you don't not kill your neighbor. Well, there's a couple reasons. And there's a psychologist named Kohlberg, and he kind of put more moral consciousness into different levels. The reasons for doing good out of fear of punishment is the lowest level of moral reasoning a human can have. It's attributed to a child's thinking.
Nevertheless, if it achieves the behavior, then you have to imagine if it were taken away, what you would end up with. Listen, hold on. We need to do a couple things here, Matthew. Okay. One is we need to open up the lines.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to open up the phone lines right now.
Okay.
And would love to have you call now. I am going to go to the extra mile here to ask you to be polite. In other words, argue with Matthew all you want, but try and be civil. All right? Here are the numbers for dark matter, and I'm sure you would like to get to Matthew. The number, get this, Matthew, is 1-855-REAL-UFO. I say again, 855-REAL-UFO or 855-732-5836. So, there you have it. Come get him. Matthew Alper will be all yours. I've had him for a couple hours now. It's your turn. From the high desert, the great American Southwest, dark matter raging in the nighttime. By the way, speaking to somebody fairly high up earlier in the day in XM, they said that all of you have been somewhat unexpected. In other words, the turnout here has been kind of over the top and way more than what they thought it would be. So now you know if that has contributed to some of the server problems and some of the rest of it. There you go. And all kinds of new stuff at artbell.com. Make sure you take a visit. And there are some really good stories up there, including the hydrogen bombs dropped on North Carolina. The real story is up there. And it's amazing to me that our government can do something 50 years ago like that. And then think, well, it's okay, once 50 years has passed, the fact that they dropped a couple of hydrogen bombs that came within 3 volts of blowing up the whole East Coast, it's okay to tell that after 50 years. Makes you wonder what we're going to hear 50 years from now. Matthew, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Are you think you're prepared to speak to masses?
I am ready, set, go.
Well, we'll see. Okay, let's give it a shot. Dark Matter, you're on the air with Matthew Alper. Hello? Hello? Going once. Going twice. Oh, wait, maybe I didn't hit the button. There we are. Or maybe somehow I'm not connected properly. Let me check that out.
Art?
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Massive Roswell's, Art.
Massive Roswell's, thank you.
Just want to thank you for having Matthew back. I think you've clearly packed these early days with some of your most extraordinary guests you've had over the years, so thanks for that.
Well, a lot of people did not exactly consider Matthew to be an extraordinary guest when I first had him on. I can guarantee you.
It's still a very...
but he is extraordinary. And if he doesn't make you think, then you're brain dead.
Well, the United States, is still, in its own way, highly religious in a very straight creationist way. I think for about, 60%, 70% of the population. So that's only to be expected. But, I enjoy the way that he forces us to think about different areas, parts of our brain, ways we interact, and to challenge. If you're not challenged, that'll be the end of us, and we don't, keep challenging ourselves to consider these issues. But I wanted to push him a little on the question of, this sort of Buddhistic way of looking at things, the oneness of all things. Every single particle and wave that makes up existence as we know it, at least the visible universe, at one point, if you take it back to the so-called Big Bang, was all together. Every bit was all together in one infinitesimally small point, something like 10 to the negative 40 in terms of the size of something so small and so united. So, in other words, I hope you'll meditate on that concept and answer me this: when it comes to the Big Bang, was it either? For me, it came down to either 2 ways to go. Either
Matthew, you're breathing hard in the phone.
You're talking dirty to me. Well, let's put it this way. So you either have a straight creation event where an outside force creates that universe, either at that moment in time, or if the universe as we know it is the result of a white hole coming out of a black hole, still you have to take it back to that earliest point. So you either have a creation event, or you have to contemplate that it's all what I would call this infinity, a holographic infinity where everything is a one total oneness, which, is a very, on a spiritual level, that for me was where the science, just like in the Tao of Physics, if you'll take a look at that book, you have this recognition that everything on the science side.
I'm sorry, is there a question at the end of this?
Yes. Do you believe that the Big Bang was an initiated event, or do you believe in infinity, which itself speaks of a higher level of spirituality that I'd like to address?
Okay, it's a valid question, because even if
one is a scientist. They still have to explore the origins of the universe, and Big Bang Theory is the predominant theory at the moment. Personally, I believe that we're basically going through a series of infinite cycles of Big Bangs. That there's expansions, contractions, that basically like a pulse in space that is ongoing.
An oscillating universe.
Yeah. Okay.
That I talked about before, I think, on a show years ago with Art. So the question is, what started it?
Right. Okay. Now here's where we go back to the brain. I believe that it's a matter of the way humans are hardwired to perceive reality. That part of the functioning of our cognitive capacities are to see cause and effect. It's, again, we're projecting onto the universe things that are beyond the universe. It's just our personalized way of trying to make sense of the universe. So we look for where-froms and where-tos. So we project onto this universe that we will never understand. I won't even understand it.
Well, you've got to admit, I mean, the Big Bang, that really is an event that seems to stump and stop science. And they cannot explain it, but they know that it occurred, Matthew.
Well, it's not that they can't explain it. It's just that no one can explain. It's sort of a metaphysical question. No one will ever be able to answer, like, why is there anything? Why is, period.
Well, no, why is there everything?
Okay, anything, everything, all of it. Time, space, why? And again, I believe that's just us anthropomorphizing the question. It's in our nature to ask why, how, when. So we project onto the universe. I don't think why, how, and when have really any bearing. They have bearing on us as terrestrial beings because we evolved to be able to function on planet Earth in a specific way where why, how, and when matter. In the greater universe, I don't think why, how, and when matter. I think there's probably dimensional stuff going on that's, again, beyond us. So for us to even inquire as to why doesn't, and again, none of it necessitates the existence of an external power. I believe that all of these things, called the Big Bang, called the matter, the beginning of matter, the end of matter.
Actually, the Big Bang necessitates the maker.
I don't believe that. I believe it necessitates something that we would call nature. That's an
opinion. That is an opinion.
Well, not really, because you can't prove that there's a conscious being that oversees nature.
No, I didn't endeavor to prove that. I simply said you're just stating an opinion. You're not proving anything. I'm saying that. In my mind, and it's my opinion, that the Big Bang necessitated a maker.
Okay. Again, to say necessitate, that becomes more than an opinion. That becomes a belief. It's just my opinion that nature doesn't necessitate a God.
All right. We've got to get to these phones.
Okay.
You're on the air with Matthew Alper. Hello.
Oswald, Art.
Thank you.
I noticed at one point he mentioned Americans falling on a bell curve in 8% in atheism, and then he mentioned in Europe it falls it's like 30% in atheism. So it depends on the country.
You're actually speaking to him, so go ahead.
Okay, so Matthew,
yes.
So it's 30% atheism in Europe. So if it all comes down to physical brains, then like the gray matter parts, then why that difference in the bell curve?
Well, again, a good question. There's a chapter in my book. Why is America so religious? A biohistorical hypothesis. And essentially, there's UN reports on the correlation between a number of things: development in a nation, literacy statistics, and religiosity. And essentially, the less developed a country is, the lower the literacy rate, the higher religiosity there tends to be. More people going to church, more people claiming they believe in God, that it plays a strong role in their life. America is an anomaly because here we are, a developed country with a relatively low, high literacy rate, and yet we rank very high in the religiosity curve.
And how do you account for that?
And I account for that in my chapter, A Biohistorical Hypothesis, that basically America was a rare experiment in migration. Essentially, what represents today's Americans, and we're not talking about the indigenous Indian population or native population, but American settlers. America was initially made up of the world's zealots and fanatics, people escaping persecution and inquisition.
And you're claiming that has changed?
No, well, what I'm claiming is there's something, one of the ways that evolution occurs, it either occurs through, there's a couple of ways. One is natural selection. So, for instance, it gets cold and those with the less furry coat die off and the furrier coats reproduce.
Just a second here, I'm breaking the tape. Get it back up.
So you end up with...
Yeah, earlier you said we were unevolving.
No,
That's right. You did.
No, we're not, but there's something called the pioneer effect, which is another way that life evolves. And when you have migrations of small communities, like when Darwin studied the finches, he found that on all these islands you had a slight variation of finches, and that's because the pioneer effect. Let's say 5 finches fly to another island, start reproducing based on, let's say, the genetics of the alpha male. Let's say it is slightly longer tail.
So in the last 200 years, we don't read enough, but the Europeans read more, so they have more atheism.
Right? I didn't say that at all. What I'm saying is, genetically speaking, you ended up with a community of hyper-religious people founding this nation.
Quakers.
Quakers was one example.
We're not all Quakers.
Huguenot. No, but the original settlers, the original community, by 1700, the Europeans referred to America as the Bible Commonwealth, and it had one of the highest levels of religiosity in any society ever, because it was founded by religious zealots.
So they had a high literacy rate as well, though, didn't they?
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is what happened.
Yes, but you saying your point is that we didn't read enough.
You're not letting me say.
And we became atheism. We became atheists.
Is because of
Europeans did, and we didn't.
Because of the genetic nature of religiosity, it can actually be passed through genes. So they've done genetic studies.
Okay, but what about all the religious stuff that happened in Europe? They had the Crusades and all the rest of it. That was. I mean, they shouldn't be atheists now.
We were
They are. They're at a higher rate.
No country in Europe was created the way America was by founding fathers of every American community was made up of zealots escaping persecution, people who are hyper-religious. Imagine that let's say music was condemned.
All of Europe was governed.
Can I finish? Let's say music was condemned by the world, and the most musical people, musical geniuses, people who would not let go of their musical heritage and decided they're willing to cross the seas in the most dangerous conditions to preserve their sense of musicality. So all of the musical savants and geniuses of the world all settled on an island. So do you believe that 300 years later?
I kind of see what you're saying, but still, there's plenty of religion in Europe. There always has been. The Pope, that place for them founded it and all that.
Absolutely, that's the premise of my book, The God Part of the Brain. Humans and animals are hardwired for religion. It will never go away. We will always be religion on Earth.
But there's a difference between Europe and America for some weird reason. You said 30% in Europe, 8% here. Our brains shouldn't be all that much different in 200 years of genetics. Especially you just say that we're not evolving.
You just conceded that no, there are instances of genetic isolation. So, for instance, among certain groups of Ashkenazi Jews, because they have isolated themselves, they can get something called Tay-Sachs disease. The Amish can get something Cotard syndrome, where they have polydactyly, where they can get extra toes and fingers, because they
know what though? That doesn't really follow, because there's plenty of genetic mix here in America. We haven't all descended from Quakers. I've got about 6 different strains of running in me.
Absolutely, but initially the foundation of this country was made up of fanatics, people who were hyper-religious, who had religiosity in their genetic code.
The natives as well.
And all born into one island.
The natives too?
No, but how much influence do the natives have on present-day politics in America?
Well, you're not talking politics, though. You were talking about genetics and religiosity. I'm saying I've got some native in me. Like, that's not Quaker blood that makes me religious. Like, because you're trying to simplify the point. These are statistical mechanics. You can't apply them to any one individual. When you do scientific studies that involve statistical mechanics, you're talking about like 83% of a population. Now, you could have one person say, that's absurd. I don't like vanilla. And yet this study says 83% of I don't like vanilla, neither do my friends. So this study's dumb. You can't point, in statistical mechanics, you can't point to your experience, your friend's experience, Joey's experience up the block. These are...
But you know, that's what you said about that. Hold on, that's what you said about the prayer study.
That what?
You just threw it out.
Yes, there are, sure. Look, there are people making claims every day. People wander up the streets. I spoke to God. Do you concede to every one of those claims?
No, he may or may not have. He probably can't produce proof of it. As long as he's being harmless enough, he's okay to have his belief there.
Hey, I'm not saying he cannot believe. You want to believe that UFOs live in your home? Go for it. I don't care what people believe. I don't care at all. All I'm doing is laying out a hypothesis for a theory that suggests that human beings are genetically hardwired to perceive a spiritual reality, and that's where all of our belief systems come from. And it's an evolutionary adaptation that makes us a more survivable animal in a world in which we know the terror of death. That's all I'm saying. I didn't say it's bad. You believe whatever you want. If it makes you happy, again, believe in the great big bird. Believe in sea monkeys, Ronald McDonald. I don't care. If it makes you happy, if it floats your boat, awesome. I would never condemn anyone. I would only condemn people if they try to push their views into my legislation. So if somebody comes out there and says, well, we represent the majority, so you have to believe in the great big bird too, and you have to do rituals that suggest you believe, and you have to wear the color red, because that's the color of our belief system, that's where I'll stand.
I think from our side, though, that we're worried that your side may try and do that.
By what? By saying that, like, you shouldn't pray at school?
Well, no, by saying that everything comes down to statistics, and then we should all run our lives based on what some guy's seen under a microscope and says that your brain produces this, and therefore we should all do this. I think that you should allow people to have their ways a bit, as long as you don't.
I just said I do. I just don't believe you can legislate in
I agree with you.
a multifaceted community like America's supposed to be. The majority shouldn't rule. So if 10 out of 15 people believe in the great big bird, in our particular nation, they should not be able to force the other 5 to, when they go to school, to pray to Big Bird, or to have Big Bird in every storefront, because it would be an insult to the Big Bird if we didn't have it there. That's all I'm saying. Don't believe in Big Bird when you go to your church. Pray to Big Bird when you're at home. Decorate the walls with Big Bird.
No, I think we should all pray to the pharmaceutical companies, right?
I don't remember advocating that.
No, I think you would.
Right.
Personally, I go
thank you, Art. Thank you, Matthew.
Farm myself. But
Okay. Whew, that was a good one. I enjoyed that. All right, let's go here. Dark Matter, you're on the air with Matthew Alper.
Thanks very much, Art Roswell's.
Thank you.
I'm new to this late night stuff, and I have found this to be quite fascinating. In fact, I look forward each night to getting on Sirius Radio and listening to Dark Matters. Matt, it's a shame that people can't just listen to what you're trying to say. I don't really have any argument for you. I have found what you've said to be really fascinating. I'm not buying into all of it, but I do have a question for you, and I am interested in trying to learn a little bit about this. I am a recovering alcoholic. I have had what I call a spiritual experience, and I guess my proof is that I once could not stop drinking, and now I have stopped. I have recovered from that disease, which I believe now so forth is a disease. How would you explain then what I bought into a higher power? How would you explain then how that? And I'm
basically, how would you explain you stopped drinking? The higher power gave you the ability to stop drinking. Is that fair?
or yes, or at least that there's an existence of a higher power.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, there's a chapter 16 in my book is called Religious Conversion. And it's basically about, people who go through religious conversion, which generally happens to the majority of people between ages 15 and 21, but it can happen at any point in our life. The interesting thing is that pretty much predominantly, like 97% of people who have religious conversions are undergoing some life crisis, often related to an addiction problem, for instance. A vast majority of those people, and I'm not saying this applies to you, but again, this is all just statistics. The majority of these people have suffered some type of abuse as children, some type of poor upbringing. They were either physically abused, psychologically abused, or somehow neglected. That doesn't necessarily, like I say, apply to you, but statistically speaking, so these are people who are suffering, and at some point, that pain is going to surface in the form of some type of addiction issue or some type of unhealthy behavior. And what seems to happen is, for a number of these people who are like at rock bottom, the brain changes. They go through a phenomenon that's cross-cultural. The same thing happens whether you're in Australia or Germany or Ecuador. People at this point in their life suddenly have a religious conversion. Their brains hit a switch, and they become hyper-religious. Their life revolves around religion. Their life revolves around their faith in God. And basically, it's like a backup support system that the brain offers us when we're in such crisis that basically we're on the brink of self-imposed suicide. We're about to kill ourselves, whether intentionally or not.
Okay.
So,
All right. I want to ask you a question. That does make sense. Where do you get the figure 8% here in the U.S., 30% in Europe? Where did it come from?
That statistic was from, if you go on the UN report, basically the UN has studies and statistics on religiosity and the extent of belief in every nation in the world.
That's an amazing stat. All right. Thank you very much. Hold it right there. We're at a break. And I can use it too. This is real radio, folks. Dark matter. In the nighttime, Matthew Alper is my guest. Has your brain yet exploded? Well, you certainly have lit up the lines. They're blazing, and so we're going to get right back to it. Matthew Alper is my guest. His book is one that you're going to want to check out. If you're not afraid to be challenged, then I would say the God part of the brain is for you. Matthew, where is your book available now?
Any Barnes & Noble, and that counts for around the world, going into Russian this week, actually. Now available to 600 million more people. Or you can go online to Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com.
You wouldn't happen to know the percentage of atheists in Russia, would you?
No, I wouldn't. But it's fairly high, particularly since they just came from a communist regime that enforced atheism as the national religion.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Back to the phone. So wherever you can manage to get the book, get it. Barnes and Noble, whatever. You're on the air with Matthew Alper. Hello. 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 Hello.
Oh yeah. Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I got a question. Did I hear it right when I heard that no hypothetical near-death experience would cause Matthew to believe in a higher power?
Certainly is what he said, yes.
Okay, as a fellow 8%er, I guess, I just came up with something that would actually make me believe.
Okay.
If I had a near-death experience, and the Great Big Bird showed me a machine that would fold space or whatever, do time travel, and showed me how to build it, and then I came back and I built that machine and it worked. As so, I would believe in the...
Haven't you heard many instances of people saying, like, well, where'd you come up with that idea? In a dream? People come up with inventions in dreams. The imagination, subconscious and otherwise, is a very powerful force. So if I woke up from a dream And I've done it several times, or my dreams kind of gave me a good idea, and I used it in my writing, or I used it in my life, or I maybe made something up. And I hear it all the time. Inventors like, I had this crazy dream where I saw myself, blah, 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 and they said I decided to try and see if I could actually make it, and that's where their technology came from, or their scientific discovery. So, again, for me, that wouldn't cut it.
All right, well, thank you. I was just thinking, like
Okay, it was a good try.
Beam me up kind of thing.
Okay, good try.
It was a good try.
Tried a new angle to wiggle in there, but...
It was a good try. And, Matthew, really, you are so closed-minded that some of the examples you've been given really would turn anybody's head. And change anybody's mind.
Okay, listen, you say I'm closed-minded, but anyone who's religious is an atheist for a million other religions. So, like, if you're a sworn Christian, and you might say, look at that guy, at least he's not closed-minded, he believes, but when it comes to all the other religions, he's as hard-lined as I am. But you wouldn't criticize him for that just because he believes in his one thing.
I might. I'm more open-minded than you think. You're on the air with Matthew Alper. Hello?
Hello?
Hello. Extinguish your radio, please.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hi, Art. Roswell's Art. Hello, Matthew.
Thank you.
Hello? Why do atheists attack Christians more than any other religion? And this is a personal question for Matthew. And please ask yourself seriously, are you more offended by Christian symbols than you are any other symbol of religion?
Not in the least. I believe that, well, first of all, you're projecting because you're talking about in America, or at least in the West. Now, why would that be true? Because Christianity dominates in the West. So if there's a group that doesn't believe in a popular religion, in our space, it's going to be Christianity. So their instinct is going to be to attack the religion that's popular for the day, the one that's trying to enforce their views and their legislation. So, yes, American atheists, for instance, are more, or Western atheists in general, the Europeans as well, are most critical of Christianity. If you go to China, they couldn't care less about Christianity. If they're protesting because they want to have their beliefs, they're protesting against the Chinese Communist government. If you tell them about, well, what do you think about Christianity? They'll be like, I don't care. So it's really...
I've got one for you.
Mm-hmm.
You spent some time in the Philippines, right?
Yes, very Catholic.
Never in my life have I seen a group of people, Matthew, who are, and they're very, as you know, very Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I think the country's like, I don't know, 90% Catholic, something tremendous like that. But they are dirt poor. These folks are dirt poor. And what I'm talking about now is happiness. I'm telling you, brother, I've seen these people in such poor situations, hungry, not able to get a full belly every day by a long shot, flooded out, wading through water, but happy as can be. And they attribute it to, what do you think?
I'm going to guess God. Look, well, that's why we evolved this function, because it comforts us, because life is painful, and life is full of misery and suffering and pain.
But surely, when you were there, you observed this phenomenon.
Well, I observed the same as I would in, like, a South American country, that people are very Catholic and bound to, the Catholic paradigm. Because, sure, when they were conquered by the Spanish, it was enforced upon them, and they went from believing in primitive...
Yeah, but Matthew, I'm talking about truly happy people here. Truly happy.
Right, but then you'd have to make the argument that basically religiosity equals happiness, and the more religious...
Well, I am making that argument to some degree. I mean, look at us. Yes, we're a very rich country, but are we a happy country? Are we as happy as, for example, what you observed in the Philippines? I think not.
Yeah, but if you look at the list of happiest countries, for instance, a lot of them are Scandinavian. For instance, they have the highest rate of atheism on the planet. Go look it up. Highest rate of atheism is in Scandinavia and Northern Europe.
You're right. Those are some of the happiest countries in the world. It's a good point. All right, you're on the air with Matthew Alper. Hello. Hello. Yes. Hello.
am I on the air?
You're on the air.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I do have a question for Matthew, but first off, I just wanted to quote something out of the Bible, which I have been studying for about 36 years, but because I had one of those experiences he's talking about.
All right, tell us about that, please, but please don't quote from the Bible, but please go ahead and tell us about your experience.
Well, his argument is basically against the Bible, so I'm wondering why.
Well, it's against every Bible. It's not just the Christian Bible.
Right.
It's against
okay. Well, all right.
Bible of every culture.
Well, okay. No, there is only one Bible, the Holy Bible.
Right. As you see it, but you know what? Listen, excuse me, miss. With all due respect, if you were born, let's say in, I don't know, Iraq.
I know, Iraq or something, and I was Muslim or something, I would be brainwashed by the Quran. But let me tell you something.
One at a time here. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, let me just read something to him. This is not from the Bible, okay?
Okay.
This is just off the back of a CD that I happened to, it's a DVD that I ordered from a man that was an atheist. His name was Dr. Hugh Ross, and he received his PhD in astronomy from the University of Toronto, and did his postdoctoral research at Caltech on quasars. On this particular DVD that I've got, he presents his scientific evidence for skeptics, he says, putting creation to the test, in other words. He says that, he has unshakable confidence that God's revelation of himself in Scripture and in nature will not, and cannot contradict, has become his hallmark, his unique message. It says he scouts the frontiers of origins research to share with scientists and non-scientists alike the thrilling news of what's being discovered and how it connects with biblical.
Okay, what do you want me to do with this?
Now,
what do you
say now is this man is just as educated as I'm sure as Matthew, and probably maybe even a little bit more so, since he is actually an astronomer and an astrophysicist.
Okay.
He says that the reason that...
Listen, there are Nobel Prize winners who believe in God. That's not proof of... Is that your proof of God, that you point to a guy?
No. My proof of God...
Proof of God?
No, my proof of God is that, believe me, because I'm 66 years old, almost 67, okay? I don't know how old you are, but I'll pray that you still have time.
I'm 142 years old.
Well, you may be, but I tell you what, you will never, ever find true happiness, and you will never.
Oh, now you're making a good point.
Find wisdom, and you'll never ever find wisdom unless. Listen to me a minute. Unless you open up the Holy Bible of God Himself, Jehovah God.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
You've inspired me, and I'm now reading the works of Homer, and I've turned to a new religion. Unfortunately, it's not the New Testament.
All right, she said you'll never find true happiness.
Right. Well, will anyone?
And we were just on the subject of happiness. So,
yeah.
It's a pretty good question, actually, in a lot of ways. Do you think that you have found as much happiness as you can here on Earth, Matthew?
Well, it certainly wouldn't hurt if someone waved the magic wand and put $100 million in my bank account, for instance. Now, can I control that? No, but to the best of my ability, I have worked fairly hard on trying to make for a happy existence, because I do believe that this is my only shot at it. So I might work extra hard at trying to seek out happiness, whatever that might mean to me. What it means to me might be different for you.
Well, indeed, it sounds like what it means to you is that you squeeze every buck you can out of atheism, and you're getting happier and happier.
Not at all. I don't squeeze bucks out of anything. If anything, let me tell you, you had me on in it was 1998 the first time, and this was for about 2 or 3 years I was on regularly. I was on once or twice a year.
Right.
There was no book written on this subject, and it took about 10 years to sink in. This book started spreading, and scientists started talking, and academics started talking, and people were using my book to teach in their colleges. And it took about 10 years, but 10 years after you had me on, all of a sudden the cover of Newsweek is Man the Spiritual Animal. The cover of Time Magazine, Are We Wired for God? There are now 150 books on this subject. You can go to Columbia University in New York and be a neurotheology major. So even as ironic as it might be, as much as you might protest my theory, you helped give birth to a new science.
Oh, and I meant to, buddy. I meant to.
Just letting you know that.
I think you're maybe more interesting now than you were then. I believed you were a good guest to have on then, and I believe it all the more now. So, that's why you're here, because what you've got to say carries weight. You're on the air with Matthew Albert.
Hey, Matt. Hey, I have a quick question.
Okay, turn your radio off, please. Come on, everybody. When I answer the phone, you can hear the show when you're on the phone, so turn the radio down when you get through. Okay, go ahead. Caller?
He turned the phone and the radio off.
Apparently.
Next.
Yeah. Next. Hi, you're on the air with Matthew Albert.
Yes, how you doing, Art?
I'm doing okay, sir.
That's great. I'm a truck driver. My name is Carl, and I've been a long-time listener of you forever, and my son, who's 22, has been listening to you since he was 10, and he's inspired by you to be a talk show host just like you, hopefully someday. But anyway,
Tough way to go.
yeah, I'm also a June 17th baby, just like you. Just wanted to let you know that. And my question is for Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty much I lean towards his point of view pretty much completely. And I've always searched myself for years through all different religions just to get a good idea of the way.
Your question is?
Well, my question is, okay, I'm pretty much an atheist too, but the near-death experience,
Right.
like you pointed out, Art, the people seeing the white light and whatnot. I'm wondering about the ones that see above the operating table, that they say they're floating above an out-of-body experience at that point, and they're looking down and they're seeing their body, and the doctor's talking, and they can repeat exactly what they said once they are off the table.
Okay, I can answer. So, again, you get any number of hallucinations. However, the only experiment that I can point to is University of Virginia did a study where they set up an LED screen on a little slit over the beds in hospitals at their clinic. And for a year, they registered people having near-death experiences who reported just that, because one of the phenomena of a near-death experience is an out-of-body experience. They sometimes go hand in hand, which I also, there's been studies that show that it can be connected to a brain region in the angular cingulate, a part of the brain, and that basically it's a type of hallucination that we are capable of having. They set up an experiment where they put up an LED screen with a message aimed upward at the ceiling, and they wanted to see over the course of a year with a certain number, maybe 3% of people, inpatients who were, surgery was done on, who claimed to have near-death experiences, and as well as out-of-body experiences, if one of them would report more than just they looked down on themselves on the operating table, so the tops of the doctor's heads, etc., but who would have also been able to say, and then I read this crazy LED screen that was going that said the cow jumped over the moon. Not one person was able to recount, and they said, did you see any type of message maybe? They're like, well, what? Did you see any letters, like maybe an LED screen? And they were like, nope. So, and that's the only experiment that I can point to where people sought to invalidate, because again, to me, one person saying they experience something isn't validation, because we all experience reality differently. So,
well, look, if you were on an operating table.
Yes.
You were under, and there was, let's say, only about a 20% chance you were going to survive the operation.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be concentrating on the doctor saying, this guy's going to circle in the drain here, and I don't think he's going to make it? Or would you be just sort of idly reading the LED screen?
Well, if I were claiming that in actuality I transcended out of my physical body.
And that is where we will have to leave them for tonight. Come back tomorrow for the final section of the God part of the brain. Until then, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Keep helping us get closer and closer to that goal of 50,000 views so those red boxes can start to be given out. And 1,000 subscribers so Google puts us on the algorithms. Until next time, like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another and release the Krakens. As we march along this overnight and every overnight, as well as we do in the evening and afternoons, here from day one. Have a great night's sleep. We'll see you all tomorrow.